I hate doing videos twice, but I'm going to have to do this video twice. It was a little screwy at the very end, and I lost focus, looking at, there's a little green icon at the bottom of my screen, and that tells me the health of the video feed, if the video feed is going out. And when I see it trending like red or orange, I'm like, fuck. And that's a break in my concentration doing the video. I didn't particularly like the video, even though the point that I was trying to make in the video was somewhat pretty straightforward. So let's do this again. And I'll just push this one live. Ocasio Cortez did a floor speech. It was her first floor speech in the well of Congress, and it broke a minor record on C-SPAN for the most watched speech. That speech received, let's be specific. Let's flip over to this before we flip over to the speech. A C-SPAN tweet of nearly 4 million minutes garnered 1.16 million views in a little more than 12 hours, setting a record for the most watched Twitter video from an outlet of any remarks by a House member, according to a tweet from Mountain Howard Morton, C-SPAN's communications director. Interesting, good to know. The socialist is apparently popular. Now, and I know socialists cringe at that. She's not a real socialist. I know they like to say that. But fair enough. Democratic socialists, or what she would consider to be, I guess, a socialist. Or you could say a socialist light. Let's say it that way. Socialist light. That's interesting to know, right? I mean, some of this is she's attractive. Some of this is, she's kind of young. She's a woman. There's a lot of... you could say mystique around her and coming out as a socialist in this way. So fair enough. There's a lot of media buzz and attention around her. And so it kind of makes sense that her first floor speech was going to be something that people were going to watch. And she's probably going to be watched closely as she goes through Congress. That said, there's something she says in this floor speech. She's attacking Donald Trump for the shutdown. And in making this argument about the shutdown, she goes into this line of, this is a subversion of democracy, in which she leaves that and kind of continues on with, it's not normal that these things are taking place. I want to get back more to the subversion of democracy, though, because I think that's a point that needs to be, you need to dwell in that space for a little bit. And that's the question of, what does that look like? What are things or elements in your society that are subversions of democracy? And even though it's true that the shutdown is a subversion of democracy, doesn't that kind of bring up the question of, well, wait a minute, is this a normal democratic government? What would a democratic government look like? And do we resemble the thing that we think it would look like? What are the problems in our country with regards to an honest uptaking of democratic process? Let's take a listen to Ocasio Cortez on this. I like this speech. So it's only like 4 minutes long. I'm going to play the entirety of it.
Check is coming. Federal workers' jobs. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to the gentlewoman from Bronx, New York, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to tell the story of one of my constituents, Yahi Obed. Mr. Obed was born in Yemen and came to the United States when he was 8 years old. His childhood dream was to become a pilot, and he knew and felt that in the United States, all things are possible, and his dream could come true. Mr. Obed's dream did come true. He's been a federal employee for 14 years, has 2 children, and a mortgage for his home in the Morris Park neighborhood of the Bronx. He studied hard, got his pilot's license, and is now an air traffic controller supervisor at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City. I spoke with Mr. Obed today over the phone. He and air traffic controllers like him across the country missed their first paycheck this past week. He was telling me about how stressful his job is. Every single day, air traffic controllers have thousands of people's lives in their hands. With weather changes, flight delays, staffing complexities, and a myriad of other issues, their days almost never go exactly to plan. His job is to find solutions, analyze and adapt in real time to keep people safe in one of the busiest airspaces in the United States and the world. And it is terrifying to think that almost every single air traffic controller in the United States is currently distracted at work because they don't know when their next paycheck is coming. Federal workers' jobs are stressful enough. The rise in New York City's cost of living is stressful enough. The fact that Mr. Obed's family cannot be reunified due to fears over the Muslim ban is stressful enough. His several $1,000s a month Bronx mortgage is stressful enough. The anti-immigrant sentiment of this administration is stressful enough. And the truth of this shutdown is that it's actually not about a wall. It is not about the border, and it is certainly not about the well-being of everyday Americans. The truth is, this shutdown is about the erosion of American democracy and the subversion of our most basic governmental norms. It is not normal to hold 800,000 workers' paychecks hostage. It is not normal to shut down the government when we don't get what we want. It is not normal for public servants to run away and hide from the public that they serve. And it is certainly not normal to starve the people we serve for a proposal that is wildly unpopular among the American people. Each and every member of this body has a responsibility to this nation and to everyone in the United States of America, whether they voted for us or not. And this president shares in that responsibility as well, which means he has a responsibility to my constituent, Mr. Obed. President Trump has a responsibility to all air traffic controllers, FDA inspectors, TSA workers, and he has a responsibility to maintain the basic functioning of the United States government. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I yield my time.
Two points. The subversion of democracy and then going into it's not normal. Let's be clear, just in an overt, blunt way, Donald Trump, based on something of a campaign promise, something that the general public doesn't care that much about, and I would wager doesn't even necessarily see it as being that much of a priority, if they see it as a priority at all. The Democrats don't see it as a priority at all. This is a crisis that's not really a crisis. I mean, ultimately, the president made this into a crisis when there is no crisis at the border. And this is purely being done for campaign points. I mean, ultimately, Trump said he's going to build a wall. He said Mexico's going to pay for it. Mexico is not going to pay for it. That was a lie the moment that he said it. But in this case, he's trying to get $5 billion. Building that wall will cost $30–40 billion. All of this is political optics. Let's be very clear. And for the sake of political optics, he's willing to shut down the government where nearly 1 million people are not getting a paycheck. Week after week after week, working in jobs and working in capacities where they don't know if they're going to get a paycheck, but too scared to strike because striking is against the law for the federal government. It is a subversion of democracy. And no, it's not normal for a president to shut down the government in this way for what amounts to a campaign pledge. It's not normal. But let's be honest, and let's go into further subversions of democracy. When Republicans are passing a tax cut that is going almost entirely to the rich, and their donors has essentially told them, if you don't pass this tax cut, we will not essentially lose our phone numbers. And on the Democratic side, the donors essentially told them to shut up about this, billionaires and millionaires stuff. Stop calling out my name. Otherwise, we will stop giving you money. In both cases, you have one class that is essentially telling the other class, we will stop giving you money in order to run your campaigns if you don't do X or if you bring up X. This has nothing to do with the American population itself. This has everything to do with one small body of greedy people who are trying to appropriate more of the resources from the population to the top. Let's be very clear. The problem here is not one or the other problem. It's both. You wonder, with the approval rating of like 70% for Medicare for all, how you can't get Medicare for all. With tax increases for the marginal rate being, again, popular, why you can't get that. Why you can't get things that are magnificently popular throughout the population. Why these guys spend 2 years talking about Russia collusion that doesn't exist instead of dealing with the priorities of a particular nation. My point to you here is the problem is not one or the other, problem is both. When you have 90% of the campaigns that are won by the side with the most cash, that is getting across to you that it is cash that drives the political system. And I don't even think what I just said there, that cash runs this political system, is even controversial. I think most people in the public would agree with it, even though they don't necessarily know what to do about it, which is kind of my point. The problem here is not one or the other, it's both. It's this political gamesmanship where one party can pivot against the shittiness of the other party when both of them are, for the most part, two Republican parties. Our political system needs a fundamental change. Her point here about the subversion of democracies and saying that in a democratic process, it will not be, this is not normal. You can go into several points on this. Whether you want to talk about the gerrymandering, whether you want to talk about the suppression of the vote, where the country makes it difficult for people to vote. Like, these things aren't part of a normal democratic process. Having cash being the ruling factor in the political landscape, that is not part of a normal democratic process. What does a democratic process look like where the public and the population itself make the determining factor, or is the determining factor on the legislation that's passed? Not pure political gamesmanship and not politicians ignoring the needs of the population in lieu of theater. I like her speech. This is a good first floor speech. And her bringing up this idea of a subversion of democracy, I think that is true, but I don't think that stops with the overt subversion of democracy with Trump. It goes into the more passive forms. So I will leave this here. I don't want this one to be long. If you guys enjoy the content, you find yourself coming here often, please feel free to support the content. And I would say if you can help, even $1 helps. So thanks all.